Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Noteworth. Today, I am joined with an amazing guest, my artist, Starlight. Once again, for the people who don't know, my name is Connor Ehrich. I am a manager, A&R, and sometimes DJ. And I'm super excited to dive back into the discussion about artist compensation and how we can kind of improve the situation right now. So I wanted to get the perspective of an artist, specifically an artist who is not someone huge like Taylor Swift, because I thought it was important to see at the ground level what young artists are facing in regards to artist compensation. So I'm super excited to have Starlight with me. If you want to introduce myself.
Hey, I'm Starlight from Atlanta. Just ready here to give y'all firsthand perspective on what it's like to be an artist in this modern day.
My first question is going to be about labels. A Union of Musicians and Allied Workers study last year said that major labels receive approximately 70% of streaming revenue, while artists and songwriters only receive around 12%. Do you think that major record labels still hold too much power in the streaming era? And how do you think that artists can negotiate more favorable deals?
Just as far as negotiating, just become more open to obtaining that knowledge on how the music business works. I definitely think these labels hold a lot of power now. As an artist, why would I want to put all these hours in the studio and only get paid such a small percentage of it?
Exactly. There's a lot of labor that goes into not only creating a song, but also marketing a song, doing live shows, putting together merch, video shoots. There's just a lot of labor that goes into creating the world and the community that an artist places someone into. And people underestimate that. And it's really important that they're compensated for that. I guess my next question would kind of be in regards to some of the middlemen in the music industry. With the rise of streaming aggregators and DSPs, or distributors, how can artists ensure that they're not losing a significant portion of their earnings to intermediaries like Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music?
Congress is making these DSPs, these streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, make it a priority and a requirement to pay these artists 1 cent per stream. I definitely feel like that would definitely help compensate as far as small artists, because a lot of these photo shoots, music videos, they get expensive. Studio time, it gets expensive. It definitely would be nice to have that recouped back into my career, since it's an investment that I took.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, this is investments that artists are taking. And especially when they do have an audience, whether that's 1,000 people or 10,000 people, that's still 1,000 people that are coming to Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music just because of this artist, or, maybe not just because, but in part because of this artist. And right now, Spotify pays an average of 0.0038 cents per stream. Apple Music is a little about double that. But still, that varies based on region. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. And artists don't really have an idea of how much money they're getting, which kind of leads me into another one of my questions, which is streaming services often provide artists with really complex data reports. Spotify for Artists doesn't currently integrate the money that you're making immediately off of Spotify for Artists. What information do young artists need to truly understand their performance and earnings? I mean, Berklee College of Music said that 72% of young artists felt that they lacked a sufficient understanding in regards to their royalty and streaming. What do you think can be done to make that a little more transparent?
I would say having access to the same numbers potentially that these labels have access to. I mean, this is my work that I'm putting out. Why should I not be able to see the true statistics of everything, see how everything is getting broken down?
Definitely. There's a huge gap in transparency. And I think even at the label level, while the labels have an understanding of what they're making, the artists really don't. And like I said before, labels are making 70% of this money from the streaming platforms, and artists and songwriters are only making 12. So obviously there's a huge disparity. Which leads me to kind of go to some alternative models. Do you see platforms like Bandcamp or fan subscriptions as a viable alternative to traditional streaming distribution models for building a sustainable career? Or if not an alternative, an additional alternative?
Definitely in addition, because we know the royalties and the numbers as far as the artist and the label are kind of crooked. I definitely think a lot of your paychecks, how you really get paid, would be through giving live performances, making sure you're giving good live performances so people want you coming back, people want you on your festivals, selling merch at your shows and everything, selling vinyl, or monetizing, I want to say, something exclusive that maybe a super fan can get versus a casual listener. Get your casual listeners intrigued and say, what's this all about?
Yeah, we've always talked about the idea of putting people in a room and making them feel something. Virgil Abloh discussed basically the idea that it doesn't matter what product you're putting out there, it matters the room you've put it in. And I've talked about that before. But in your head, what does that look like in an artist? And do you see any artists that are doing a good job of that right now?
Just building the community, put your music out there, put your art out there, and the people that really love it, you cater to those people. Don't worry too much about the people that are going to criticize you or say this is corny, this is whack. Just making sure you're building that community and making your fans feel like they're a part of something, so they want to give into what you're putting out. So they want to go to your shows. They want to feel like they're there for you, and just, yeah.
Absolutely. And what are some of the strategies that you think artists can use to cultivate that fan base? I mean, there are statistics that show that artist-specific content, people who subscribe to it, are 4 times more likely to purchase merch compared to non-subscribers. So what kind of stuff do you think artists can be putting out there, or even if it's not subscriber content, what kind of eye-catching stuff can artists put out there to make people want to buy their merch?
Definitely comes down to branding. If someone who's just not that aware of you, if they see something and they can resonate it with you and immediately recognize, hey, this reminds me of this artist, or that design, that logo is that artist, definitely comes to that. And that kind of leads your community, that leads your cult fan base. They all have one common goal. And you look at your shows, you'll see all of them in wearing the same colors, or they're all into the same thing because of something you built.
Absolutely. A USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative report found that 82% of recording contracts that were reviewed contained ambiguous language regarding royalty payments. Do you think there should be a push for standardized language in artist contracts to ensure clarity and prevent exploitation, given there isn't really a standardized level of education that artists are getting before they enter these contracts?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's an unfair advantage between this label's lawyer who's getting paid millions of dollars to do this, has been doing this for 50 years, versus a lot of these artists are young. They're 19, 20, 21. They're not as knowledgeable, or their vocabulary definitely isn't as strong about specifically words when it comes to music. They don't really know what a lot of these words mean.
Yeah, the kind of legal jargon that people use in these contracts is ambiguous in a way that just prevents artists from knowing what they're walking into. Yeah. It is purposefully misleading, and I've seen firsthand artists that have walked into ambiguous contracts, whether that's with a label or a management team, that results in them getting screwed over at the end of the day. And a lot of young artists lack an understanding of these laws. How can we improve access to legal education for musicians? Do you think that comes down to teaching stuff like this in schools, or, other forms of education?
Definitely allowing, I can say, books, classes, if anything. If, there's music electives, you see choir, you see band, orchestra, why not allow business class for these programs? You see a lot of recording studios in these universities and colleges, but not too many music business classes, or they're not offering as much. They're not going in depth of knowledge as far as music business.
And especially when they are offering these classes, they are not marketing them and targeting them to actual artists. They're marketing them and targeting them to the people who are going to become the record label executives and the managers of the world. And so when that's who's seeing these classes, it just creates an even larger disparity because artists aren't getting that information. I guess my next question would be, how can artists maximize profitability from live shows through strategic touring, merchandising, and live VIP experiences? Like, what does that look like? And how can they make those more memorable experiences for people?
Definitely, I would say a meet and greet. A meet and greet is definitely something that can separate your casual listeners to your super fans. A lot of people, they'll love your music. They get the chance to meet you or just create a memory with you. They'll definitely go out and listen to it as time goes on. They'll definitely go out and put their friends and family onto your music. Selling merch, it's just deeper than just selling a t-shirt. A lot of people might not come with $50, $60 that day. You can have something as cheap as a beanie, make everyone feel involved. Get something that everyone, even a sticker for $5 they can slap on the back of their phone case. Or you could sell these $100 jackets, make them rare in a sense, make people feel like they have to get this or they'll never get a chance to get it again.
Absolutely. And is there anything in artist compensation in the world of that kind of realm of exploitation that has particularly stuck out to you or that you've had particular problems with, whether that's direct issues with you getting compensated or on the flip side of things, barriers to even getting that compensation, whether that's a barrier through things like promotion costs or just through a lack of access to other resources? Like, what have you faced that has been kind of different barriers in your process?
I would say since I think the labor to pay ratio is very off. I'm investing my hours and time into this. And since it's not paying me, I would have to get a day job a lot of that time. I'm still a human too. I have to pay bills just like everyone else. I feel like um definitely like promotional costs, videos, just all the things of that nature that you have to put out to the world to, to get your music out there is definitely a challenge I faced.
And there is an issue that people talk about with a lot of the, specifically in rap, promotional pages, charging a lot for content, but discounting prices for major labels or major management companies. So these big artists that maybe don't need this discount as much are the ones that are actually seeing it versus the small artists that are maybe more so building up the community. And then after these artists blow up, we see these pages kind of profiting off of them and beginning to use them just for their own sake. What do you think can be done to ensure that not only promotion is accessible, but that these pages aren't just exploiting artists? Do you think that this should be something that's a full income job, or do you think that this is not the right way to go about that?
I definitely don't think it's the right way to go about it. Social media is free. Everything's free. Everyone has access to the same resources. I think those that are putting out great art and art that the world loves, music, whatever it is, beyond music, anything, I think those are the people that should be getting pushed forward and that the labels should. So if you're a rap blog host, you own a page, I think it definitely comes down to putting out what maybe you think is good and sharing that with the world. There's so many ideas, so many different music takes behind these accounts, and they all have faces, they all have souls, they all have things that they're interested in. I think they should be here to empower the smaller artists versus the ones everyone knows or have $1 million budgets.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move on into, I guess, what the artist can do at the practical level to help their situation out. Obviously, there are a lot of structural and situational issues that are at large right now, but there are things that artists can do to stand out to make sure that they are being compensated, whether or not it's to the level that they should be, more than they are right now. What strategies can young artists use to cultivate a strong online community that fosters fan engagement and loyalty in a way that actually monetizes for them?
I would say definitely the first thing, just keep putting your music out there. If it gets one like, that means someone saw it. That's potentially someone that can become a fan of you. Definitely staying true to yourself and branding yourself. There's I guess, issue of a lot of people cloning in today's age. If you really stay unique to yourself and create a unique fan base, then that can definitely help build a community, help them stick.
Absolutely. There's a huge thing with A&Rs and labels where they discuss the marketability of an artist, whether or not they can kind of fit them into a pre-existing puzzle piece of a fan base. And I think that if the industry moved more towards a world where that puzzle wasn't so fractured and we were focused on creating new fan bases, because we are living in an increasingly fractured music world. I mean, we used to have alternative representation like David Bowie and Prince at the mainstream level, but then we kind of entered an era of pop culture where normal artists like Taylor Swift, which is kind of the epitome and representation of that popular it girl, in high school. It feels like we're all kind of going, I heard someone talk about going back to the lunch tables. And like, the theater kids are over here and the jocks are over here and the emo kids are over here, like kind of creating those lunch tables or creating those new fan bases and fracturing out. How can an artist take advantage of an increasingly fractured music world to make the niche fan base work for them and they get compensated from that? You don't really have to be a mega artist to have a career in music.
Just as an artist, be open to new opportunities, be open to work with new people. you got to get out your comfort zone, get out your box a little, go work with that pop artist. You never know what you can make, or you never know what talents you have. Maybe you do have the capability to make a pop song, and just things of that nature.
Yeah. Do you think the government has a responsibility to protect artists when it comes to not only things like exploitation with contracts, but just compensation from these DSPs, pushing things like that 1 cent law for artists? That could make a huge difference, be literally the difference between an artist making minimum wage and being able to sustain a life off of their music or not. Um, do you believe the government has a responsibility to intervene with that, or do you think it's up to the artist to advocate?
I think it should be both. I think with the government holding that responsibility, holding that weight over these platforms' head, and the artists advocating it, I definitely think that would be a good mixture of making sure it actually gets done.
Yeah. These record labels have huge amounts of influence in politics too, frequently we find. Do you think that a law that would empower artists to gain a larger income off their streams would make a world where record labels aren't as relevant, or maybe artists are less quick to sign to a record label?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people overlook how much of a difference there is between that 0.0074 versus that 1 cent per stream. You get 250,000 plays on one song, you're making dollars. That is definitely something that I definitely think for artists, you wouldn't be rushing to sign. You're making your own money. You're able to invest that money back into your career. And, as you invest into your career, your numbers go up. Everything is going well for you. You're able to put out merch. You're able to shoot better music videos. Just the quality of everything goes up. So you're looking like, what is the point of me signing and giving away 70% of what I'm already making when I could potentially be making more?
Exactly. And I think that if the reliance on record labels was decreased and artists were more likely to go independent, it would finally pull away some of the just structural issues we see. Even looking at more niche genres like drill, we see how labels have torn it apart by basically exploiting kids that are as young as 14 years old, and their real life trauma and issues for online clout and for money and profit. And they'll sign an artist quickly and then drop them later and kind of just abandon them without helping them learn how to sustain themselves. What do you think it would look like, those genres would look like in a world where record labels didn't hold that much influence and they could make a song go up that quickly?
I think without the usage of record labels, it really comes down to making sure you have a good team around you. There are a lot of artists that are independent that are able to sell out arenas, as far as like Suicide Boys. They just are known for having a very good, hardworking team around them, surround themselves around right people that want to see them succeed. If you decide, hey, I want to do this alone, or maybe a record label is not for me, definitely make sure you have a great manager, a great publicist, a great videographer, an amazing producer.
Definitely. And the Suicide Boys have had like more than a decade long run. They're an incredible example of somebody who knew what niche they had a power over and focused on it. They didn't try to ever change into something they weren't. They've stayed very true to their sound throughout their entirety of their career. And it's worked for them. We see Grey Day sell out year after year, almost every single stop, no matter who they bring on. And that's really cool. I guess my next question would be, from the consumer perspective, how can we promote ethical music consumption habits where fans understand the value of supporting artists directly through purchases and subscriptions? There is this concept that music is free. And while I do think that music is something that can be free and is free in some cases, there is real labor that goes behind a lot of music and money that goes into it. And people need to recognize that. And if they are going to listen to and support an artist, contribute to that, because they are benefiting from it at the end of the day. People say that this music changes their lives. A few dollars out of their pocket is not going to kill them. How do you think that consumers can be more conscious about how they're consuming their music and who they're supporting?
It just all comes, like you said earlier, building a community. Maybe get something like a Bandcamp, get something like a subscription that people can subscribe to. I'm wearing my own merch. I even have a website. If you have something like that the general public can get access to, and those people that are willing to put a few dollars into or a little bit of their time into supporting what you're trying to do for them. I definitely think that,
And Bandcamp specifically, we haven't talked about that yet. Bandcamp is a really interesting platform. I mean, it acts kind of as a social media platform, but not really like TikTok, to engage consumers with the art that they are interested in, whether that's through buying stuff from the artist or just engaging in a forum with their fellow community members. Bandcamp has existed for a very long time, over a decade, maybe even 2 decades, but it hasn't been utilized as much in recent years as streaming platforms and DSPs have kind of increased in relevance. Do you think that artists and consumers both will see a resurgence in things like Bandcamp and physical media? I mean, we're already kind of seeing it, but do you think that that trend's going to continue in the future?
I definitely think it should. There are there are people blowing up every week. We see with the power of social media, things like Bandcamp can really separate those who have their community and those who have their fans that will stick. It can definitely help that curate and build that community and help it stay stronger with giving your fans access to something the general population or the general public might not have. Or yeah.
Definitely. Now we've talked about some of the more complex topics and questions in regards to compensation, but I'm going to dumb it down a little bit and simplify some of the stuff that I want to ask. I guess my first question is, can you describe your experience with artist compensation in the digital music landscape?
I think I put a lot of my time into it. I have been rewarded and been paid for a lot of things. I do get paid for live shows, but just I guess the royalty I make about, even though let's say okay the labels are taking 70%, I'm independent. I don't have to worry about it. But I have a manager that I have to pay. I have a videographer I have to pay. My producer, my engineer he deserves to be rewarded for the work he put in. I wouldn't be able to make this music without my team. So there's other people and other factors that goes into making this music that other people don't see, that artists have to, think about and worry about. Hey,
Yeah. And what are some common challenges that you or your friends have faced when it comes to that fair compensation? Like people trying to take advantage, or even not people, just platforms. And I guess we've already talked about some of them, but just the structural issues as a whole, what have you faced?
I see exclusive pages, for example, charging artists to put out the music they made on their page just because they have a couple thousand more followers. I definitely think that's an issue that should not be, that should not be something an artist has to pay for.
And can you describe a little bit to the listeners who don't know what an exclusive page is on SoundCloud?
So an exclusive page, essentially, it has a decent following. Their following probably subscribes or follows that page because of the music they put out. They want to hear more music. So the artists that are you could classify them as throwaways or exclusive drops. They put it on their page so it doesn't, interfere with what they're dropping. But that way they can still cater to their fans and put out mass amounts of music.
And fans go to these pages because they're excited to get new drops from their artists that they feel are, again, exclusive to, a more niche, I guess, audience. They found this artist through another fan page, and so, or a hosting page, and they're excited about that. But these hosting pages wouldn't have the popularity they do without the artists putting out the songs that they are. So it is important for them to recognize that. And a lot of times they take advantage of specifically small artists when they're pushing these songs. They maybe won't charge the bigger artists because they have whatever the platform, but these smaller artists, they'll charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars, some pages even as much as $1,000 to put their songs up or to run promo. And yeah, that's not exactly the right way to go about things. And a lot of promo pages will lose the integrity of their page and compromise the music for the sake of the money. And not only does that hurt their engagement in the long run, it hurts the artists that they're putting up, it hurts the people who are paying for promo, it hurts the people who are getting pushed who aren't. So definitely making that more equitable, I think, is important. And my next question for you is, how do you see distribution models evolving in the music industry? And how do you think it's going to affect artist compensation? Do you think it will be that 1 cent? Or do you think something more like, where we all pay our money to a platform, and instead of having a pro rata distribution model where I've talked about it before on this page, on this podcast. It goes to everybody on the platform equally. Rather, if the money was going directly to the artists that people were listening to, do you think that would be more beneficial for small artists?
I think it's a decent alternative route. Me personally, as an artist, I definitely say the 1 cent rule would be the most beneficial way of paying artists and compensating artists. Just because, you have that one song that pops, you're getting that money immediately. You can look at your royalties in real time and see how much you're getting without the need of a label. And you can make sure that you are getting compensated for the work that you put in.
Yeah. Can you discuss the role of politicking and kind of the networking of the industry and what that behind the scenes shadiness looks like and its effects on your success as an artist and whether or not you're compensated at the end of the day?
It can get very cliquey. A lot of people they pick and choose who they want to surround themselves with. They, often mistreat other people just to based off an assumption of someone. That can definitely block opportunities just because it gets so cliquey, because this world is also, it's very cliquey, but it's also very small and everybody knows everyone. So if someone hears one thing, it can people are very shady.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to ask a couple of questions about numbers. What role do you think data analytics and insights play into optimizing artist compensation? I mean, we know right now the artists see almost none of the numbers when it comes to actual money going into their pockets in a transparent way, while they do see their streaming numbers. What do you think will fix that for artists and what will it look like?
Just allowing the artist to have access to those resources, because you can easily hold the label accountable and, know what's really going on behind the scenes. Even, you can look up on Google how much is it a stream, how much money per stream. You do that math in your calculator. You can definitely hold these labels accountable and make sure they're having some form of integrity.
I guess these numbers on Google, though, are, I guess, an aggregate average of what that looks like. And another thing I wanted to ask you is streaming compensation bases or changes based on region and varies based on different regions. Do you think that artists can target regions where maybe their money is larger in regards to compensation for their streams to ensure that they are getting a higher level of compensation? Or do you think that it shouldn't have to be like that, or a little bit of both?
I think, yeah, it should be like that. I think artists should, if there's something you want to do, you should step out of your comfort zone. You know, we've seen in the past American artists, they go overseas, they go to Europe, they go to Asia, and they're getting significant amounts of money because these American artists don't go there that quite often. Yet they're still listening to the music. They still want to see you. They're still interested.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think some of the ethical responsibilities of the industry stakeholders like labels and promoters and streaming platforms are in ensuring fair compensation for artists? Like, what responsibilities do they have?
Personally, I would say, I think providing them the resources to see the analytics and the real data that is being put behind these contracts and these streaming, all the platforms and all the different things that factor into a contract, live shows, touring, merch sales, brand deals, just letting them, you know, and simplifying the vocabulary as well, I definitely think.
And my last question is going to lead me into a little preview of what I'm going to be talking about next week, which will maybe be an interview, but likely be a video essay. UMG removed all of their music off of TikTok, which was 30% of music on the platform. Do you think that was a positive move for their artists, or do you think that was a negative move for their artists, and why?
For me, it's like a seesaw. I can see the pros and cons of it, because the pros are, TikTok is responsible for a lot of people's music seeing the top and seeing millions and millions of streams. I think, and if you really want to be a fan of that artist, it would separate your super fan from your casual listener, because now they would have to find other ways to look for your music. But as an artist, it just hurts the marketing like exponentially. This is one of the biggest social media apps on the world. There are millions of people that use it, and now I can't even put my music on there. It's kind of like, damn.
Not only that, but it's a music centric app. I mean, it's got a music note as its icon. It started as Musical.ly.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy that these labels are preventing their artists that are already signed from existing on this platform. Yeah, I guess that's where I'll leave it off today. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. And I'm definitely excited to talk more about this next week. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit of the perspective from an artist, especially someone who's young and coming up in this digital age of streaming. I think it's important to go to the ground level and really see what artists are facing now rather than these legacy artists that have existed during kind of different eras of music and have been able to modify their approaches for streaming, but maybe don't rely on that because of their fan base they built before the streaming era. And I really hope everyone enjoyed this podcast and tunes in next week for another episode of Noteworth.